When it comes to fruit, blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes, it's a very tricky subject. Although there are many fruits you can eat, there are way more fruits you definitely want to avoid. That's why it's good to delve into this subject a bit more. I'm Ali from Illness Free Life, and in this video you'll learn the most unhealthy fruits you definitely want to avoid if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. Number 1, processed fruits. Now, although this isn't really a fruit, you definitely want to avoid this category. And a lot of products fall into this category. Think of fruit juices, fruit jams, fruit bars, canned fruit in juice, and dried fruits. The problem with this category is that they're often made from unhealthy fruits, which isn't good, but the way they're processed make the fruits even unhealthier. And the reason for this differs from product to product, but in general, two things can happen. Either the amount of sugars and carbohydrates will be concentrated way more than in the original product, which increases the amount of carbohydrates and sugars in the product per unit of weight, or it decreases the amount of dietary fibers per unit of weight, which of course makes the product unhealthy. So basically, the amount of carbohydrates and sugars increase, and the amount of dietary fibers decrease, which of course is far from ideal for your blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. Plus, eating these products will also do little to no for your satiety, and thus they will not fill you up, and more often than not, you will eat way too much of them, which of course is also unhealthy for your blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. Take for example eating an orange and drinking orange juice. Most people will be able to eat maybe 1 or 2 oranges before they are full. But drinking a glass of orange juice is very easy. And if you consider that it takes up to 5 oranges to make just 1 glass of orange juice, you can see what the impact of dietary fibers are. Dietary fibers fill us up and make us eat less of a certain product. Most people will struggle to eat 2 oranges, but drinking a glass of orange juice is very easy for most people. Yet, when you eat 2 oranges, you eat 2 oranges. But when you drink orange juice, you drink up to 5 oranges worth of sugars and carbohydrates. This is just a small example of what happens when you process fruits, especially the unhealthy ones. So avoid this category like the plague. Number 2, bananas. Bananas contain around 20% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 2% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Unfortunately, these are unhealthy ratios, and this means that bananas are a no-go to eat. Yes, I know they're very practical to eat and they're commonly available and most people like to eat them, but unfortunately they're far from healthy, or at least they're definitely not the healthiest option you can choose if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. If you want to know what healthy options are, I've made a video about this in the past. You can find that video by clicking here. Link of the same video is in the description of this video. Now, when it comes to bananas, you definitely want to avoid the browner, riper bananas, because the more bananas ripen, the unhealthier they get. And when you consider that a normal banana is already unhealthy for people with blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes, then it only means that bananas, the more they ripen, can become more unhealthy for your health. So definitely avoid bananas if you can. Number 3, mango. Mango contains around 15% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 1.5% dietary fibers. Unfortunately, this makes mango also not ideal to eat because the ratios are off. It contains too much carbohydrates and sugars and too little dietary fibers to be considered healthy, especially if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. And when it comes to mango, it's the same as with bananas. The more they ripen and the softer they get, the more carbohydrates and sugars they'll contain per unit of weight and the less dietary fibers they will contain per unit of weight. And mangoes don't have a lot of dietary fibers to start off with anyway. So mangoes definitely should be avoided. Number 4, pineapples. Pineapples contain around 12% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 1.5% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Unfortunately, pineapples are also a no-go because of the unhealthy ratios between carbohydrates and sugars and dietary fibers. As you can see, most tropical fruit, or at least a lot of them, are unfortunately unhealthy. If you look them up, you'll see that they contain relatively a lot of carbohydrates and sugars, which isn't ideal, and rarely do they contain a lot of dietary fibers, which also makes them not very healthy to eat. It should be a given, but pineapples that are canned in the syrupy juice that they come with are of course also unhealthy. If pineapple as a whole is unhealthy, then any product made from pineapple, especially in some syrup, is definitely also unhealthy. So I hope that goes without saying. Number 5, mandarin. Mandarin contains around 10% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 1% dietary fibers per unit of weight. This also makes the ratios unfortunately a bit off. If you want to eat a citrus fruit that is somewhat similar to mandarin, you're better off eating oranges. Although oranges are not great and perfect to eat if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes, they're definitely better than mandarin. Oranges are somewhat on the border of healthy and unhealthy, so they're okay to eat. They're not great, they're not bad, they're just okay. But their little brother, mandarin, is definitely off limits. Now quick, before we continue, do you like this video and want to receive more of these videos? Don't forget to give us a like and subscribe for free to this YouTube channel. That way you'll never miss a video we publish and you'll help us reach more people to improve their blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. And now back to the video. Number 6, grapes. Grapes contain around 17% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 2% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Unfortunately, this makes grapes also an unhealthy choice to eat if you have blood sugar problems or type 2 diabetes or want to prevent these problems. It also doesn't really matter which color or type of grape we look at. The nutritional value of most grapes is strikingly similar, and thus this means that they're all similar in how unhealthy they are. And yes, grapes, especially the red ones or purple ones, do contain some antioxidants or healthy compounds such as resveratrol, but that definitely shouldn't be or isn't a reason to eat them. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to fruits, the main criteria for selecting healthy and unhealthy are their sugar content, the carbohydrate content, and their dietary fiber content. And when their sugar and carbohydrate content is high and dietary fiber content is low, it doesn't matter what other things they do or do not contain, they will still be unhealthy to eat, especially if you already have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. Number 7, cherries. Cherries contain around 12% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 1% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Unfortunately, this makes the ratios of cherries a bit off and thus unhealthy to eat if you have blood sugar problems or type 2 diabetes. Now I know most people kinda know that berry-ish products such as strawberries or blueberries or raspberries tend to be healthy and think automatically that products like cherry, which are somewhat cherry-ish, are also healthy. Unfortunately, they're not. And this is of course due to the high carbohydrate and sugar content and relatively low dietary fiber content. Number 8, watermelon. Watermelon contains around 8% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 0.5% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Although watermelon does not contain a lot of carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight, it unfortunately contains almost no dietary fibers to compensate for the carbohydrates and sugars, and makes this also an unhealthy option. Now I know a lot of people like to eat watermelon, especially in the summer on warmer days to hydrate their body. Although I can understand this and it's definitely a tasty thing to eat, it is unfortunately not healthy. And again, it is because the ratios between the carbohydrates and sugars and the dietary fibers are off. Number 9, dates. Dates contain around 64% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 6.5% dietary fibers per unit of weight. And unfortunately, these ratios are off, which is a surprise to some people, because in grocery stores you can find more and more products that are flavored or sweetened with dates as a healthy alternative to sugar. Unfortunately, in our body, to our body, sugars are sugars. There are small differences between what effects certain sugars have in our body compared to other sugars, but overall the effect of sugar in general is the same in our body. And it's irrelevant, or at least not that important, where the sugar came from, whether it's from dates or sugar beets or whatever. Sugar is still sugar, and it will elevate your blood sugar and worsen your type 2 diabetes. And unfortunately, this is no different when it comes to dates. Although they're a natural product and they might seem and taste healthy and fiber rich, they're also unfortunately very, very carb rich and sugar rich. And there are not enough dietary fibers to compensate for the high amount of carbohydrates and sugars in this product, which makes it unfortunately an unhealthy fruit to eat if you have blood sugar problems or type 2 diabetes. Number 10, figs. Figs contain around 20% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and around 2.5% dietary fibers per unit of weight, which makes unfortunately the ratios a bit off. Although figs might taste somewhat fiber rich to some people, unfortunately it's also pretty sugar rich and carbohydrate rich, which at the end of the day makes this product not ideal to eat if you have blood sugar problems or type 2 diabetes. And it goes without saying, of course, but dried figs are of course also unhealthy. If the base product, fresh figs, are unhealthy, then drying them will never ever make them healthier. If anything, it becomes unhealthy because you lost a lot of moisture that would normally fill you up a bit more than the dried variation. Number 11, lychees. Lychees contain around 16% carbohydrates and sugars per unit of weight and only 1% dietary fibers per unit of weight. Although lychees might not taste very sweet to most people, unfortunately they do contain a lot of carbohydrates and sugars and little to no dietary fibers to compensate for this. The overall effect of eating this product will unfortunately be an elevated blood sugar level and a worsening of your type 2 diabetes. So when it comes to lychees, you definitely want to stay away from them because they have a horrible ratio when it comes to the amount of carbohydrates and sugars and the amount of dietary fibers it contains, or better said, doesn't contain. These were 11 fruits you definitely want to avoid if you have blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. If you want to read more about these fruits and other fruits, then I have a free article for you in the description of this video, which leads you to our website illnessfreelife.com with more information about unhealthy fruits, blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes. And if you're on our website anyway, don't forget to subscribe to our free diabetes free secret. This is a small document we compiled in which we teach you what the main causes of blood sugar problems and type 2 diabetes are and what you can do to prevent, improve and fully reverse these problems with healthy nutrition. If you have any questions about this subject, please leave a comment down below and I'll see you in the next video.